Hello and welcome to the Wednesday check-in brought to you by David Gockstein. I'm your host Landy and today is August 26th, 2026. And we're looking at Bitcoin here on the daily to start. We did see that Bitcoin got aggressive expansion after getting above the compression area around that 65.5 to 65.7. Marched its way, especially in lower term timeframes, up through the various levels, hit the $78,000 to $80,000, even gave a nice swing above, and then kind of has pulled back ever so slightly. I will look at the daily zones of interest here in just a moment, but I wanted to call something out on the weekly that I do think is pretty important. So if we come over here to the weekly chart for Bitcoin and we pull the high to low move down in this case, and we take a look at where we are in this particular moment. We're right at the 618 in the prior weekly. And we also, of course, did close right on it. And then obviously we've dipped down below it to test the upper first standard deviation of the Bollinger Band set here, and are currently trading above that 618, which is coming in at 77,850 here on the index. So, this does favor, again, a confluent move to somewhere in the mid 80s. Now, of course, that's all contingent on, whether or not Bitcoin can actually get above the most recent highs here, which was a retest of the monthly zone at 82.5. We had the highs coming in at 82.8 to $83,000, depending on your exchange. On the index here, it's at 82.8. So if we do see Bitcoin trade above there, I wouldn't be shocked to see the 50% area and maybe even a swing above it, right? In the mid $80,000 region, around that $85,000 to $86,000. So that is something to watch out for. And as I've mentioned, the upper third standard deviation I talked about on Monday is the 382, right? And if you were to pull this with the zero on the actual low over here at 57,750 and the one at the 126, you would actually see it. Of course, a 382 is a 618. So it's just a matter of which way you're pulling them. And in this case, that would be another significant area. So if we do see the weekly close above here, it's still got some room to the upside. Pay attention to the mid $80,000 region. It's right around the low side of this structure here. Bitcoin is trading inside of the wick, but we have the low side structures over here. And of course, the high side structure over here that Bitcoin was kind of sitting on in that mid $80,000 to $90,000 region. Above 90K or 89 to 90K, which was a higher low over here and a lower high over here. Well, that would start to look like Bitcoin testing, if we do see it trading above that area, and of course, above the low side structure here around the mid 80s, 85 to $86,000 and that 0.5 fib, then we can entertain moves to that 382 or 618, just depending on which way you're pulling your fibs. They are on log scale in this case, and so is the chart. The other big thing here would be, if we were to see Bitcoin hit that area, that is the close open of this weekly right here that comes in line with some of the close opens over here. And it wouldn't be too much to ask to potentially see, especially any kind of closes above that area, not just strikes at it, a significant push to try and grab $98,000 to $100,000 where this swing high is, which again is where another weekly higher low is over here. So we have the weekly higher low with the weekly lower high relative. Now, granted, there was, this was all a big trend breakdown. We didn't really get the low set until here, and then it was just another lower high. So in the last week of December 29th, in through January, you had the low set in the consolidation. The big push up to 98 became a lower high and then dump off down to 60, which 58 to 60 was the area that we were looking at. Price heading towards, and we got 60, we got a front run of 58, we got the 58 strike directly, and then 57,750 sweep, lower high, higher low, higher high, this can get continuation to the upside. That doesn't mean it's going to, right? It's pulling back in the daily a little bit here. It is holding above that 618, but I did want to point out that that is a 618 right there, or a 382, depending on how you're pulling your fib. So let's go ahead and compare this down on the daily here. And you can see that that Bitcoin, after the initial expansion, as I kind of stumble over my words, you'll have to forgive me today, a little scatterbrained, I apologize. But in this case, we had the big expansion, right? We got our moves to all of the relevant areas that we were looking at, 68 to 70, 70 to 72, 72 to 74. And then I said above 76 where it gets interesting, because 78 to 80 is the play. We did see the Tuesday session strike above 80. And I talked about on Monday that, if we do head above there, above $80,000, especially on daily closes specifically, 82.5 to 83 is the name of the game, that big monthly close open structure. But we got a higher low here that came in on Sunday, right? On Monday's close, we confirmed that higher low. We swung up, and now it's about, do we get continuation from here? Now, for volatility expansion, you need to see Bitcoin's price action closing above. That doesn't mean that it can't swing below, but closing above the upper first standard deviation, which is coming in at 75.5, which is that higher low right there. But this is going to move up. I am recording this before the close of day. This is going to move up and likely going to be somewhere around, between 76.5 to 77, which would be the close open here. So this is going to be the daily area of interest that is going to be relevant, right? So between the close open over here, and we can change this. We'll make this a little bit more visible, and the higher low. And what I'm going to be paying attention to is if this holds up, right, as a zone. Continued expansion to the upside, upper second standard deviation, as long as its structure is maintained here in terms of higher low structure. What I'd be looking for is the upper second, which is now at $82,000. So the weekly area of interest that I was talking about was 78 to 80. We hit it, kind of stalled out, swung above it, pulled back, and are now trading, above $78,000. I would be looking above 80 to 82, and then of course 82.5 to $83,000, which I'm going to mark out just because I'm not going to pull up the areas of interest right now, but this is the monthly overhead. And we can see that not far off that upper second standard deviation. Then of course we got the swing above there at 82.8. So that would be the name of the game, anywhere above there, looking for the close opens on the weekly above in the mid 80s, 85 to 86. So one step at a time. I would want to see, for continuation, I would want to see this continue past yesterday's swing high in the 81,200 region, right? I believe that was 81,255 was the high of the Tuesday session. And, I'd want to see Bitcoin obviously trade above there. We're probably headed for 82,000 by the upper second. It's it's probably going to grind. If anything, it might throw a wick at 82.5 or the highs at 83, 82.5 to 83. But realistically, because this is so expanded, we're probably looking at the upper second acting as like a governing area on this particular move up. So the other thing to really pay attention to is 68 to 70 to the downside. That is where the daily basis band is coming in if we do lose the low in a structural break. And then things get interesting for, this particular move. So if we were to, if we're going to look to the downside here, you know what, I'm going to have to throw on some of the areas that I talked about prior. So we're going to have to take a look at the levels because I want to illustrate a point here. 74 to 76 is the important zone, just below the low, right? Any kind of closing structural break, warning signs would be trading below it, but that's not that sentence. closing structural break would come into 76 to 74. Anywhere below there, 70 to 72. And then, at worst, you're looking 68 to this 70 area. So where we see the bottom side of this 70 to 72 range right here, 70,000, 70,500 to 68K, where the basis band is, that would absolutely need to hold up. And in fact, the basis band is likely going to move towards $70,000. So it's probably going to be right here in no man's land between these two levels that I have on the chart. But realistically, I've been talking about 68 to 70, 70,500 or so, which is the bottom side of this structural area of importance to the downside. So just beware. If we do see the low dropped with a structure break and we see 74 lost, it's going to be all about this zone, essentially 70 to 72. You need to see that hold up if this move is going to, have any further potential to the upside if it doesn't take that potential first. And of course, it can swing down 74 and even swing the low. You don't really want to see a structural break on a close though, because then it would increase the chances of lower highs. Although, there's a few different scenarios that could play out, right? We already have higher low structure here. So you end up with, the high, higher low, higher high. You could, if we don't see immediate continuation towards, 82 and a half, 83 and potentially more, we could see how we could get, up there to test, even if we got a break and it holds the levels. So, it doesn't have to necessarily, come back, but the further down that it gets, the more likely that it has to get back into a compression than re-expand through. So you'd rather see those levels hit overhead first. Move is a little extended, but it's still got room, essentially, is what I'm saying here. So until then, I'll let you know kind of what I'm going to be looking for in shorts. And the short side of the equation would be, you get the move up, move down, move up through the levels, you get this, and then, then you get that kind of a look, trend break, lower high, lower low, but doesn't always look that clean. Sometimes it can stay right within the range. In that case, I'd be watching for any compression, but right now this is still full on expansion with the ability to test that monthly area overhead and, those highs at 82.8 to 83. That's all I got for you on Bitcoin today, but I am going to look at a few other things here. By the way, I really appreciate all the likes and shares on the Monday video. It's very helpful, and I'm glad that many of you who messaged me and have talked to me on stages did find some of the information that I was talking about helpful as well. But one of the big things is I didn't cover any traditional market stuff or oil, gold, any kind of stuff like that. So let's go ahead and take a look at commodities first. Gold. Sitting on our line right here, this was kind of the area that I was looking for. Overhead, I'd mentioned, 46 to 47.50. I don't think we've hit 47.50. I think it was just shy of 47. 46.97. So still higher low structure. The last low was a higher low swing with a little bit of a lower low close, but it was right in that 42.50 to 43.80, 4400 area. What I would be looking for though is if we lose right around this, right around where the high was here that it's holding on to on a close open, right around 4,600. If it does drop that, I'd look for 44.50 to 44.60. Anywhere below there, it's right back into test the basis area and right back into the zone 42.50 to 4,400. To the upside here, 47.50 to 48 is the name of the game by the upper second on its way to test around that 48, 30 to 50 on the bottom side of this major area overhead, with the potential for more towards 5K if it does recapture it. But for now, I would be careful here. If you are on the long side, I hope you were taking profits or you do take profits just to hedge, because it might even hang around here, but it is looking as though it would want to correct back to the mean and maybe consolidate a little bit, As long as it's sticking above around 4350 to 4400, essentially the top side where the basis band is coming in, it's fine. You'd want to also see it maintaining basis band closes, but so far doesn't look too crazy. All right, let's look at silver. Silver is doing the same thing. So last time we looked at this, I was talking about kind of getting above where the upper second standard deviation was. And I believe this is the weekly area of interest right here is where the basis band was, which is why that's marked. And around that 68 to 70, looking there, I think I talked about 75. Did we hit 75? No, it was 70. But 68 to 70 essentially has been struck. And then the next big area would be to move towards the 1272, 74 to 76 with a median strike at 75. Loses it, look to 65 at the basis, loses that, you need to hold up at 62 or else it's going to drop down to, the upper 50s to $60 region. So I would pay very close attention. Still an uptrending structure, still an upside expansion. Next area to take out to the upside, 71.55 by the upper second to head towards 72, and then it's all about 74 to 76. With the upper third there, splitting the difference at $75. Back, if we do see a breakdown below the 68 region, pay attention to 65. If it drops it, 62 and a half to $60 is the name of the game by the lower first. If it drops anywhere below there, we're back to the lows again. Oil. This was kind of a joke, but not really. It's a triangle, everybody. One of the things that I wanted to point out here is just the wick perfect gap fill that we had on the 6730 area of interest there. Major area. Look, we have a little bit of a trend break, but not on a close, so things can hold up here. This is this is basically a range as it stands right now. One of the big things that I would look for is back above 85, looking for the highs 86, 87, 69, nice. But it's really about 88 to 90, and then up to 92 right around the highs, in towards the 90 to 95 zone that I've talked about so much. If this does drop 78, which is where the lower first is, so if this does drop down and lose like that 79.62 to 78, that is going to start to look like it wants to play in the volatility zone of interest back to 75 by this low. Anywhere below there, we're looking 68 to 70 essentially by that lower third. I would look for that to start stretching out to the bottom side if it did start to head down that way. And trust me, that's what a lot in the US want for WTI, because then that means, gas prices go down, overall energy prices go down, and everything along the supply chain starts to decrease in price or cost. Yep, that's commodities real quickly there for you. Let's take a look at SPY. SPY has not quite hit the prior highs as support, 755 to 760. It did tease down towards that area with a little bit of a front run. I would be careful because, we're coming into a compression here. It's to the downside. It really is all about, 755 to 760 here. If it drops it, looking at 750, right? Lower second. If we do see back above the basis band at 767 or so, that higher low right there, a little bit of a consolidation, even closed a lower high, but then just reversed right back up to the highs there. I would look right back in that area, right where this lower high came in around 775, anywhere above there, 780, which is where the current highs are. Anywhere above there, we could start to look towards the upper second at 785. I would take it 5 points at a time. I'm talking about that a lot, man, especially when it comes to closes. So there's not too much here, but I would pay attention if we get a retest of 755, 760, because if it drops, probably pretty quickly moving towards 750. So NASDAQ hanging out on one of our lines that we talked about, currently are trading in and around it. What's going to be interesting is to see if 29,850 can be recaptured to the upside here, which is now the upper first. Kind of stalled there last time, higher low, and then kind of chopped its way up. But realistically, expansion to compression again, hugging that basis band, which is just the 20 simple. Yeah, to be quite honest, it can dip down towards its most recent low. You don't want to see it lost. It essentially went for the gap fill here by that lower first around 28,850, 28,860. If it does drop it though, we're looking at 28.5 area, even down to the 28,350. I would say more like 28.5 to 28.6. Right around here, I would be beware of this low over here and this low over here, which is in more towards that 28, 2 to 3 area. Anywhere below there, it's back to 28K. Even back above the basis, which is at 29,380, 29.4 area, I would look for a little bit of a gap fill around that upper first, around that 29,850, 29.9, and maybe try to push back towards 30 up here around the local high. Anywhere above there, looking for that 30,400 and then potentially up to that 30,650 before the highs at that 30,750, 760 area. Anywhere above there would start to look like we're going for 30,900 to 31K. If we were going to look at Dow, we got a move down below and then fairly quick recovery. In fact, no real wicks on the bars. Obviously, you can go look at the futures chart if you like. I've had people request that I just chart the futures, and I can. But when market open happens, these levels are going to be just as clean. But I maybe will start just charting futures for those that have been asking. In this case, to the downside, 52.5, 52.550 is the name of the game. We got, the low side 52.754, but any lower than that, lower second, and we'd start to have to entertain a move, essentially back to this high side structure around the 52 even, 51.9 to 52 even around here and that lower third. And then it's, potentially all the way down to that 51.50 or 51.5 level right around here, 51.555, 51.551. And then that's where things get interesting, because any lower than that, this thing's going straight for 50. It'd be full on expansion, by the way, 50,500 to 50K. Back to the upside here. 54 is what you need to see closing above to go back and run the highs around 54.5. And then potentially running that high at 54,744, 750 area on its way to go test the upper third around 55 to 55.1. And then we'd be looking for expansion probably to 55.3 to 5 as the next big areas in blue skies. We can always pull some fibs if you'd like and have some fun with fibs. But I just touch on these things, and granted, we've been very accurate in traditional markets, but I only just touch on them. And I think as I start doing some more live streaming, I will dig into the charts a little bit further for those that have asked me to on the traditional market side of things, especially because we are getting a lot of tokenization of, stocks and getting a lot of RWAs. And it's really, that's the direction that we're going to see a lot of blockchain going. And we're going to see it obviously more and more on centralized exchanges and perp dexes. So I think that's the direction that we're going to start leaning into. Start with Bitcoin, maybe take a look at some commodities just so we can get a base level, especially with oil for what's going on in terms of a risk environment and the trade. But I think we should probably start looking into tracking bonds. I'd like to talk to you all out there about the bond market and some of its importance, but at least if nothing else, tracking so that you have a good understanding of what I'm looking at and why. But more importantly, I think is starting to get into some of the relevant markets on the traditional market side that are making their way over to perp dexes and centralized exchanges. So that's going to be on the docket. And then also there's going to be more streams instead of recorded videos. So I look forward to doing that. I want to thank you all again for liking and sharing and hitting me up. As you know, it's been an exciting move up. We've been waiting for it for a long time. This is a crazy, crazy deep compression. We were positioned well for it. I had head short on one side of the range, log on the other. One side was going to get stopped out just so I could catch the move. I explained this here, explained it on stages, explained it on David's show as well. When I say stages, I mean both Bitcoin and ATC. I've talked about this with many of the traders. So it's been fun. And if you missed it, don't worry, because what goes up must come down. It's just a matter of what kind of structure does it build when it heads back down. And in this case, I'm going to see you on Friday, where I will have a live stream at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And I wish you all a wonderful morning, afternoon, and evening, no matter where you are in the world. Please trade safe. And of course, as always, stay safe. With all of that being said, Landy out. Take care.